Welcome to the Powerviz Horizon chart tutorial. In this video, we will explore the advanced features of this powerful custom visual for Power BI that allows you to unlock full potential of your time series data. Whether you're tracking trends, identifying anomalies, or making data-driven decisions, the Horizon chart has got you covered. Let's dive in and discover how to make the most of these features to enhance your data analysis experience. First of all, let me show you how to download this visual from the AppSource. You can click on this drop down here under the Build a Visual tab, click on these ellipses here and select Get More Visuals, which will take you to the AppSource. In the search box, you can type in Horizon chart and this is the visual by Powerviz. So let's click on that and click on the add button here, which will add the visual to your Power BI report. Now that the visual has been successfully imported, let's click on OK. So let's click on this icon here which says Horizon chart by Powerviz and add this visual to our Power BI report. I have a sample data set here of the credit card. Let's start by adding in the x-axis, the y-axis and the measure to the visual. Let's bring in the card source date into our x-axis, and on the y-axis let's bring in the card type, which is over here. I'm going to bring in the card type into the y-axis, and on the measure I'm going to bring in the average spend for the last 3 months. So let's analyze the average 3 spend of the credit card by the card type. So now I have the data plotted in our visual. By default, the data here is appearing in 4 different layers, which is denoted by the colors that you see here in the legend. And on the x-axis here, I'm visualizing the data all the way back from 1998 until the year 2020. And on the y-axis, I have the different card types that I have in my data set. So let's head over to the advanced settings by clicking on this gear icon here and let's explore the visual. The first option that we have here is the horizon, wherein you get to choose the different curvature types. By default, it is selected as natural. You can choose between either linear or step. So let's click on linear and click on apply. Now you can see that there are sharp edges over here. And let's go back, and there's also an option here where you can choose the curvature type of step. So when you apply this, the data points over here appear as a step. The next option here is to control the scale. By default, the scale is set at 1.5. So when I move this to, let's say, about 5 and click on apply, you can see that we can now increase the scale of the layers on this visual. Now let me reduce this to about 0.5 and click on apply and see what happens. So when I click on apply, you can see that we've now reduced the scale of all of these layers. The next option here is to control the height between the categories. Right now it is set at 50. If I increase this to about 100 and click on apply, you can see that we've now increased the size between the categories. And the next option here is to consider the null values as 0. I might have some null values in my data set since I have the data all the way back from 1998. And when I uncheck this box here and click on apply, you can see that this particular data here is missing and it is not considered as 0. And now based on your requirements, you can change this to highlight that there is missing data between the year 2004 for the card type of Centurion. Now let's head to the next section, which is layers. The first option here is to enable whether you would like to show a negative layer or not. Let me just go back to the visual here. On the legend, I have the positive values which are divided in 4 different layers. Now let's say you would like to highlight all the values here that are below 150,000. So what you can do is go back to your layer section. You can enter a value here in the base value section. For example, if I enter 150,000 here and click on apply, all the values here that are below 150,000 gets applied or highlighted on the visual here. And you can see that we now have the legend for negative values as well as for the positive values. The negative values have 4 different layers and the positive values have 4 different layers. Now you can also control them when you go back to the layer. You have the positive section here and also the negative section. Under the positive section, you have the number of layers which you can control. Right now it is set to 4. You can either decrease them, let's say for about 2. When you click on apply, you now have only 2 positive layers appearing. And when I go back here, if I want to increase the number of layers, I can do that. Let's say if I want to display number of layers as 6, I can click on apply and now I have 6 different layers on the positive values. The next option here is to define your custom layers. When you toggle this on, you will be able to enter the values which you would like to control. For example, let's say from 150,000 to 200,000, you want to have that as one layer. You can do that, and you can see that the value here has now changed to 200,000. Let's say from 200,000 to 250,000, you can have a different value. You can create as many layers as you want, and you can either delete them if you have too many here. And now you can click on apply. You can see that we have now just created 3 layers here for the positive values. Likewise, if you want to control for negative values, you can do that. You can enter the number of layers you want. Let's say for example, you just want to see 1 layer for the negative values, and then you can click on apply. I now have only 1 layer appearing for all of the negative values. For the negative values, you can also control the layer type. By default, the layer type is set to mirror. You can also change this to offset here, and then click on apply. You can see that now the negative values here are appearing as an offset. They are appearing in reverse. So let's go back to layers here under negative tab. You also have an option here to define your custom layers. If you would like, you can enter values here and define the number of layers that you want to display under the negative values. And then let's head over to the next section here, which is colors. Under colors, you have positive and the negative tab. Under positive tab, you have the area color palette here. There are various color palettes to choose from. For example, you have the first option here, which is single. You can click on apply, and you can see that since we have 3 different layers here, the colors here are appearing in 3 different colors. One is the lighter shade of blue, little darker shade of blue, and then the darker shade of blue. Likewise, you have the next option here, which is the gradient option. You can also choose to apply a mid color if you would like to. You can enable the mid color here and choose a different color. For example, let's say you want to apply this dark blue here. I can select this blue, click on apply, and then click on apply. And now you can see that we have 3 different options here being applied to our layers. Likewise, you also have an option here where you get to choose the color for every single layer. For example, let's say for layer 3, you want to have this purplish color. You can have that. You can click on apply, and now you see that the layer 3 color has changed. And the next palette available here is the sequential color palette, where you get to choose the different color palettes that we have under the sequential color palette. For example, let's say you want to apply this teal color here. You can choose that and click on apply, and that particular palette has now been applied to our visual. And the next option here is the diverging color palette, where you get to choose the different diverging color palettes that we have within the visual. For example, you want to have a red to green diverging color. You can click on apply, and now red to green color palette has now been applied to our visual. The last option that we have here is the qualitative color palette. We have various color palettes under this option as well. Let's say for example, if you want to apply the prism color, you can click on apply, and now the prism qualitative color palette color has now been applied to our visual. And then we also have the negative palette, where you get to choose the same kind of color palettes that we saw in the positive color. For example, we have by layer, by sequential, diverging, qualitative, etc. The next option here is fill patterns. When you enable this, you get an option here whether you want to either apply by single to a particular layer or by category itself. For example, when you choose by layer, you have a layer, for example 1. You can choose the different patterns that are available within this drop down. Let's say for example, you want to apply diamond to the first layer, and when you click on apply, the first layer here within the positive color values get highlighted in that particular pattern. And now you can also choose a different layer, and from this drop down you can choose a different pattern and then click on apply. The second layer is now filled with star pattern. Likewise, you also have an option here to apply the fill pattern by category. Let's say for the cashback category, you want to have these squares. You can apply, and now the entire cashback category is filled with these squares as you see here on the screen. Like we filled the positive values with these patterns, the same option is available for negative as well. You get to choose what you want to fill for a negative pattern. For example, let's say you want to have this flowing lines for the negative pattern, you can do that. And now for the negative values and for layer 1, the floating lines have been applied. The way we fill the patterns for the positive values, we have the same thing here under the negative tab, where you get to fill the patterns for the negative values. You can either choose the layer or you can choose to apply by category. Now all of the negative values will get applied by the patterns that you select from this particular drop down. So let's say for example, you want to apply flowing lines for the layer 1, you can do that. Now the layer 1 for the negative values has been applied with this flowing lines pattern. You also have an option where you get to upload your customized pattern. When you click on this icon, you get to choose an image and you can apply that particular pattern to either by the layer or by the category. The next option here is ranking. When you toggle this button here, you get an option whether you want to rank by top n or by bottom n. And let's say, for example, I would like to display just top 5 categories here. I can type in 5 and then click on apply. I now have the top 5 categories being displayed on my visual. The next option under ranking here is to consider peaks only, wherein only the peaks are considered before the ranking is applied. We also have the inclusive ranking option here, wherein if multiple categories have the same rank option, you'll be able to display them. Right now I have selected just 5 categories. When I click on apply, since I have selected the inclusive ranking, and there is another card type category of Indian oil which has the same ranking, and that is why that is being displayed on this visual. So let's go back to ranking now. We also have the next option here to display the remaining as other. So when I toggle this on here, and you get an option here to choose whether you want to sum or by average. Let's go ahead with sum and click on apply. Now my rest of the card types here are being grouped as others and displayed on this visual. Let's go back to ranking. Like we saw top n, we also have the bottom n. For example, if I would like to display just the bottom 5 categories, I can do that. Click on apply. And now you can see that our chart is filled with the negative values, and these are those cards which have the lowest amount of spend. Let me just reset this, click on apply. The next option here is sorting. You get an option here whether you want to sort by x-axis or by the y-axis. For example, on the x-axis here, I have the data from 1998 to 2020, which is displayed in ascending order. If I would like to sort this by descending order, I can do that. When I click on apply, you can see that it is now sorted by the descending order on the x-axis. And likewise, I also have an option here to sort by y-axis. I can control the sorting by y-axis either by the name, the highest or the lowest value, the mean value, the median, or by total. So let's select highest here and then select descending and click on apply. And now all the highest values are being displayed on the top, while all the lowest values here are being displayed at the bottom of the visual. Let's head to the next feature here, which is the reference line. I can add reference line to my visual. So when I click on add new line, and I have an option here where I can choose the value where I want to add a reference line on the x-axis. For example, let's say I would like to add a reference line here for in the year 2014. I can select 2014 here. Under line options, there are various options. You can choose the different line style. You have the solid line, dashed line, and the dotted line. Let's add the dashed line here, and you can also control the line width. Let's increase this to about 2 pixels, and we can also change the line color. For example, let's say if you want to highlight this in red, you can do that. And let's click on add and click on apply. I now have added a dashed line to our visual. I can also change the label that I have on this reference line. So let's head back to the reference line here. Let's click on this edit button. The first option here is to control whether you want to display the label options or not. So when I turn this off and click on update, I no longer have the label being displayed here. But if you would like to have the label display, you can toggle this on. You can change the label from here and also choose the text color, the background color. You also get to choose the font size, the font family, the styling. Also, you get to choose the alignment where that particular label is being displayed. By default, it is set at center. If you want to display that at the bottom, you can do that. When I click on update, click on apply, you see that the label is now being displayed here at the bottom. You can also control the label options here. Let's scroll down. You can also position here whether you want this to appear on the left or on the right. You can choose right here and click on apply and click on apply, and now the label will be displayed on the right side of the reference line. The last option here under the label options is to add the border style. When I toggle this button on here, you get to choose the border radius. By default, it is set to auto. You can also change this to custom and then control the radius value that you would like. You can also change the width and select the border color. When I click on update and click on apply, I now have added a border to our label. Let's head to the next section here, which is grid lines. You can add grid lines on the x-axis, on the y-axis or to the baseline. Let's toggle this on and click on apply, and now you can see that the grid lines are being displayed here. You can also control how they appear. For example, you can choose them to be solid. You can either have them dotted, dashed, long dashed, dot dashed, two dashed, etc. Let's go ahead with dash and then increase this to about 2 pixels. You also have an option here to control the color of that particular grid line. When you click on apply, you can see that we've now added a blue dashed grid line to our visual. So this was about the x-axis. Likewise, you also have the grid line for the y-axis. You can enable them. You get to choose the different styles that are available here. For example, let's go ahead with dotted. You can have, let's decrease the width here to about 1 pixel, and then let's also change the color here to gray and then click on apply. I now have the light colored dotted grid line on the y-axis on my visual. And then the last option here is the baseline grid line. You can enable this, and let's go back to the y-axis and let's quickly turn them off for a moment. On the baseline here, I get to choose the style. For example, let's go ahead with solid. Let me also increase the width about 2, and I can get to change the color here of the grid line as well. Let's select this blue and click on apply. And now you can see that I have added a grid line to the baseline. The next option here is the tooltip. The tooltip here is basically the value or the details that appear when you hover over a particular data point. Right now you can see the category information being displayed, the year being displayed, and also the sum of average spend being displayed. If you would like to display more information whenever a user hovers over a particular data point, you can do that, or you can control that from tooltip. There are various options that you can display. Like for example, you have the highest value, you have the lowest value, you have your mean value and the median value. You can check these boxes and then click on apply. And whenever you hover over a particular data point, you will now be able to display more information about your data to your end users. The next option here is the import export. Now let's say you've spent a lot of time in formatting this visual and you'd like to recreate the same visual with the same kind of formatting options in a different Power BI report. So this is where the import export feature comes in handy. Once you've finalized the theme of this visual or the formatting options of this visual, you can head over to the export tab, click on this copy button here, open a notepad file and paste the data that you have copied. Let's head to the file here and click on save as. Let's give it a name. I'm going to call this as Horizon theme. Make sure you also change the file type of this particular file. It has to be a JSON file instead of a text file. So to change the file type, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to type in dot followed by JSON, which is JSON, and then click on save. Now that I have saved my file here, let's go back to my Power BI report, and now I have created another visual with the default options. So let's head over to the advanced settings. Under import export option here, I have an option here to upload the file or the JSON file that I have. I can click on upload, select the file that I have, and then click on apply. Now that I have applied the custom theme, you can see that all the features that I had added in my previous visual, like the reference line, the labels here, the negative values, all of them have now been formatted in the same way in my new visual. And the last option here under the advanced settings is the show condition. The show condition here basically works on a Boolean value. The show condition feature helps you in either displaying or not displaying the visual based on a certain condition. Let's say, for example, I add a slicer here with occupation as source, and unless and until I have any value selected in my slicer, I don't want this particular visual to display the data. So what I can do is I can create a measure here with the Boolean value. I'm going to call this measure as show. I'm going to use an if statement here and say if is filtered. What am I checking here? The occupation column. If this column is filtered, then I want to return 1, else I want to return a 0. I'm going to close the bracket here and confirm. And when I go to the format section of this visual or the build a visual tab of this visual, I have an option here as show. I can bring in the show measure that I have created into the show section. And let's go back to the advanced settings now. Let's head to the show condition. I now have this option enabled. I can choose the show field here. In this case, it is show. And the message here, I can choose the custom message that I want to display whenever the chart is not being displayed. I also have an option to control the font family, the styling of the font size, color, etc. And now when I click on apply, that particular condition is now being applied. So when I deselect any values from this slicer, I have the custom message being displayed here which says show chart condition is not fulfilled. Outside of the advanced settings, we have a couple of features here as well. And when you hover over this, you see that we have annotations. So when I click on annotations, you can create an annotation. For example, you want to highlight this particular data point here and add in some information for the end users to know. I can add in the annotation here. For example, I can type in and say this is a sample annotation, and then click on apply, and now you can see that I have added the sample annotation here. I can also edit the annotation. I can also choose the different connectors that are available. There is a straight line, there is a polygonal line, there's also a curved line. You can also choose the stroke here, which is solid and dashed, and also the marker here, dot marker or the arrow marker, and the badge, the font size, etc. And when you click on apply, you see that the connector line has now changed. The next option here is to be able to view the data in a grid view. All of the data that you see here can also be changed into a tabular view so that you can take a look at the data that you have added into your visual. You also have some of the options under the format section of the visual. The standard ones like size and style, the title of the visual, all of that can be added from the format section. You also have the visual settings where you can turn on or turn off the advanced settings, the annotations or the grid view. You will no longer see those icons when you turn them off. Likewise, you also can control the y-axis and the x-axis here. You can choose the bottom, the position of the labels. You can choose the range. You can choose the y-axis. For example, you can choose the position of the y-axis, the label limit, the font size, etc. You also have an option here to turn on or turn off the legend, control the position of the legend. And the last option here is the number formatting. If you have to change the number formatting, if you want to change the decimal separator, the thousand separator, the decimal values, display units, all of that, the prefix and the suffix values, all of that can be controlled within the format section of the visual. And there you have it, the Powerviz Horizon chart, a game changer in the time series data visualization for Power BI. If you found this tutorial helpful, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button for more insightful content and stay updated with all the latest features and visuals for Power BI. Until then, happy visualizing.